Good afternoon. In the previous two videos we talked about lap weld, butt weld, and T-weld, so now we're going to weld around a circular path. Welding around the circle can be difficult just because of the wire that comes off of the welder that gets fed to the actual wire itself that welds. You have to be careful that it does not tuck underneath the actual arm, so you have to start in a certain position and end in a certain position so that that wire does not get kinked. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my z-axis and x and y-axis to the center of my circle, and I'll work from there. So if I look at my table, here's my table, and it is 470 from the world mode of the robot. And if I look at my workpiece, this is 60 away from the center of the table. So if I take 470 minus 60, that means I am 410 from the center of my cylinder to my robot center, and I'm also 450 millimeters in the y direction. So I have a coordinate system for my cylinder. So I'm going to go to position and x, y, and z. The x coordinate is going to be 410. The y coordinate is going to be negative 450, and then I'm going to go to that position. So right now I don't know what the z coordinate is. I need to bring that down. So I'm going to click on my tool, and I'm going to make sure I'm in world mode. I am in world mode, and I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to figure out how far over I need to be. I'm actually going to move this on the outside so I can see my tip of the welder. I'm going to bring this up just a hair bit, and I'm going to go to the side view so I can see, and I'm going to bring it up just a hair bit again. That seems to be pretty good. Let's go to position and see where we're at. So we're at 329. So I'm going to go with negative 329, and that seems to be right at that point. So I'm going to go back to that position, 410, and then negative 450. And that will bring me right to the center of that cylinder. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate it to where my start point is. So I'm going to start actually right outside here on this quadrant right here, which is pretty close to the outside of my arm. So I go to positive 90. There we go. So my positive 90, and you'll notice that the wire of my whip is going to be pretty close to the arm. So that's why I'm starting at this position. So once I have that, then I'm going to bring this out 50 millimeters because my diameter of my cylinder is 100 millimeters. I'll type in 50, and now I'm at the outer quadrant of that circle. Now, if you don't have a CAD program, you will have to bring in, by using the teach pendant, right to where you want the arc to start, and then teach that component. Now, because we have the software and we have everything in place, it makes things a little bit easier to find the exact position. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my program. So I'm going to go create program, and I'm going to call this circle weld, and we're going to go edit. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our user frames. So we're going to add new instruction over offset frames, and we're going to go U tool, and we're going to use the tool number 1, which is our welding stick. And then we're going to go new instruction, and we're going to use the user frame number 1 as well. So now that we have those two frames, I'm going to add a heading to this. So I ECDM, insert, and we insert one line above here. And I go new instruction, miscellaneous, remark, and these are going to be my frames. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bunch of instructions after this, or extra lines. So I'll go ECDM, insert, and I'm going to go probably about 20. So I have a bunch of lines to go after this. So now that I have my frames, we're going to now do the home position. So I go new instruction, miscellaneous, remark, and we're going to call this my home position. Exit. Then we're going to add our move point, add move point, joint, and if you remember, we set it up a point registry. So we go inside to the number 1, choice, point registry number 1, which is our home position. So you don't have to keep reteaching the home position because we set up a point registry that's part of the joint point registry, so that it doesn't matter what frame we're in, it automatically goes to that home position, which is right up front with the welding torch 90 degrees to the ground. Then what we're going to do is come down here, And we're going to add new instruction, and we're going to go miscellaneous, remark, and our remark is going to be start point. So weld start, safe position. So weld start, safe position. So now that's a single point. Leave a line for space, go down again, and we're going to add our weld start. Alright, so here's where our weld start's going to be. So we're already at this point, so let's save this position here. So we're going to go from our safety position, we're going to go linearly down to that point. So we're going to add move point, linear, fine, and then we're going to have that point. So we're at 200 millimeters per second, or 100 millimeters per second. So I'm going to kick it up just a little bit at 200 millimeters per second. And then we're going to go to our safe position. So we're going to go coordinate and switch it to tool frame, and then we're going to back it off just enough to make sure that we are completely out of the way of our fixtures or anything else. So I usually go to be between 50 and 100 millimeters, but it all depends on the scenario. So once we're here, we're going to go from the home view or a home position down to this position using the joint method. So add point, joint movement, 100% fine. Just remember that you may not want to use 100% because it may shake the table because the robot moves so fast. So just be careful about that. So then we're going to go to our next position. So I'm going to turn on the step mode, go shift, and I'm going to go forward to my start point. And now what we're going to do is going to do that circular path, but we have to do a weld start. So we're going to switch this. So we're going to go weld start, and we're going to go centimeters per minute. Okay, notice how it swaps everything. So now I'm going to actually go in here and we switch this from 250 centimeters per minute. We're going to switch it to millimeters per second. So we're going to choice millimeters per second, and I'm going to go 250 millimeters per second to keep up with everything else that we have been doing. So we're going to point 1, 250 millimeters per second. We're going to stop at that point. We're going to start the weld with procedure 1, schedule 1. Again, later on in the videos, we'll talk about what this actually means, and we can go back and modify this. And then we're going to now do this circular path. So I'm going to switch this back to world mode. There we go. And we move this back to the center. So I'm going to go negative 50. And then I'm going to rotate my welding stick so that it is perpendicular to our joint part number 2. So I'm going to my position, and right here I'm going to go back to 0, which brings me back this direction, and then I'm going to go back to the 50, and now I'm at that position. So now we're actually welding straight on. So if you wanted to have that curve in there, we would actually have to go back and reteach that position. So if you make a mistake, it's pretty easy to actually fix. We're going to just go back in line here, and then we're going to go shift step mode, make sure step mode is on, and then we're going to go forward, which brings us back to position 1, and then we'll just add our angle to it. So we want to be dragging our weld, so we're going to rotate it to the left. Because we are welding to the left, we're going to rotate to the left. So rotate it in the direction of our actual weld. So let's go to our position, and we're going to rotate this, and we're going to rotate it to the left, and I'm going to usually go between 15 and 25 degrees. So I'm going to go 20 degrees, enter, and now we have that nice rotation on there. So we are now going to drag the weld. So then, since we changed this, we have to now touch up this position. So with it on number 11, go shift, touch up. Now that position is now saved. So now I can go back in here to line 12, and I can go into my joint right here. So negative 50, there we go. And then I'm going to rotate this around so that I'm back to 0. And then I'm going to bring it out so that it is 50. So now I have that position. I still have that 20-degree rotation on it, so I am dragging that weld. And now I'm going to save that as a position. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go add move point, and we're going to do a linear, and inside here, so instead of a linear, we're going to switch this to circular. So I go here, circular, which adds my circular point. Now we have to save our next point, so I'm going to bring this into the center of negative 50, and then I'm going to rotate this again to be 90 degrees. Now I'm on the outside, wrong side, negative 90 degrees. There we go. and then I'm going to bring this to the outside, which is -50. So now I'm at that quadrant, and then this is going to be my position right here. Now to save that, you'll notice that there's no touch-up. You have to go to the outside, and then you'll see the touch-up show up. So make sure Shift is pressed, and then touch-up saves that position. Here's the other thing that a lot of people forget to do. This is the actual speed. So if I want to follow my procedure and my schedule, I have to switch this from 100 millimeters per second or whatever it is to weld. And what that does is it looks at the welding procedure and it takes the speed from that welding procedure and it will transfer that to the actual. Now I'm going to continue along line 13. I'm going to bring this in my 50 millimeters. I'm going to rotate this again, position, and I'm going to rotate this to -180 so that it's at the quadrant over here, and it still has that 20-degree rotation on it. So I'm going to bring this back -50, so I'm in this position. Wire is still, it's getting to the point where it might become a problem. So we actually may have to stop at this position and then start maybe on the start sign and then rotate all the way back to the other position. But we're going to just keep going along like there's no such thing as the wire, and then we will swap it here. So we're going to go add move point, linear, and we're going to switch this to a circular path. And then we're going to save this position, which it already saves. And then we need to go down, and then we need to go to position 1, but we want to make sure that we are in proper rotation. So when we bring this in, my 50, and then we'll rotate this again, position, and we're going to add 45 to this. So you can see now that whip definitely went underneath that arm. So this will probably be a bad thing to do. But again, we're just going to assume that there's no whip right now, just to show you that it can do a continuous path. Now it all depends on where you place this and where you start can really change how you can get all the way around. So we'll do this all the way around, and then we will swap it into 2, and then we will maybe make some changes so that we could get all the way around. Okay, so now that I have that in position, I'm going to save this position right here. So I go Shift, touch up, and we want welding speed, and then we're going to stop the weld. We're going to go new instruction, arc, weld end, and we're going to end with procedure 1, schedule 1. Later on we'll learn a little bit more about that. So you can add procedures on there without adding the full list of information from the point and the speed and the termination of that. So we have our weld end, and then we're going to go back to our home position, copy my home position. There we go. So we go back to our home position. Alright, so let's try this out. So you can see the whip here started out in good position, and you can see it's following on the path. There's the weld actually. Rotating it around, keeping that proper rotation, making sure that we are dragging that weld, not pushing that weld. So in this case, the whip is still good, and then right on this side, this is when it starts becoming a problem. So the whip is up here, rotating up, so that's carrying the wire, and you do not want to kink that. You want to keep it as straight as possible. So right in there, straight as possible. This is where it starts becoming a problem, right here. So now we just kinked our whip that carries the wire, and that will definitely mess things up. And then right here where it's going to rotate it around, so it rotates the proper direction so that the whip comes back out, but going underneath like that is bad, do a lot of damage to your robot. So these are things that you have to be careful about and double check and triple check to make sure you are not damaging and kinking that whip that carries the wire to your actual welder. Some welders actually have it kind of built on the inside here, so it's not a problem, but the ones that we have does have a whip coming up to the top where there's a holder, and then that is a problem. So 2 ways we can combat that is, number 1, we can break this weld up into 2 different welds, so we can weld 1 quadrant and then flip it around and weld the other side, or we can rotate our welder so that it starts kind of in the position here and then rotates around. Okay, so either way works. Again, it depends on how you set things up and making sure and paying attention to where that whip is. Another way to rotate this is to try to get it so that the first part is directly underneath the arm. So we would actually have the first point right here. To make that a little bit easier, we're going to set up a user frame that goes diagonal through here so that the quadrant becomes this 45-degree angle here. So I brought my robot to 410, negative 450, negative 329, and I'm going to teach a new user frame for this position. So I'm going to go to Menu, Setup, Frames. Here's Tool Frame. We're going to go to Other, User Frame, and we're going to go to user frame number 2, and let's go to inside there. So we're going to go Detail, and I'm going to call this Circle, Exit. Alright, so then we're going to go Method, and we're going to go 3-point, and then we're going to do our center origin to be right here. So I'm going to go Origin, move our way down, and we're going to go Shift Record. That's going to be our center, and then our X component is going to be X left and right. So we actually move this out to my position. So 100 and then up 100. So this is going to be my X positive direction. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go Shift Record. There we go. And then we're going to go back to that position. So let's go back here to my origin, and we're going to go Move To. And we're going to now make my Y direction to be the top corner right here. So I'm going to go up, there we go, and then over to the top corner. And now we're going to go Shift Record, and now we have our new position. Now we have our user frame that we can work off of for our actual components, which makes things a heck of a lot easier to work with. So I'm going to go outside here, and I'm going to go to my program, my circle weld, and we're going to duplicate this, copy, and I'm going to go circle weld 2, and then I'm going to go to that start position right there, and we're going to use user frame number 2. And again, the home position doesn't matter because it is in joint mode, and joint mode is not dependent on which user frame you are in. So this we do not have to resave. So we're going to go to our starting safe position and our start position. So I'm going to go back to our center point, and let's make sure that we are actually in U-frame number 2. So let's go back to Menu, Setup, Frames, and let's go Previous. So we're back here, and let's go Set IND to Enter. So now we're in actually user frame number 2, and I'm going to go back into my program. I'm going to turn on my user frame, so Coordinate, Tool, User, and notice how our user frame now is matching our center point, and then we can move away from there. Okay, so we can actually go to our position directly. So I'm going to go position XY, which is 410, and then negative 450, and 329 is good. So I'm going to move 2, so now I'm in that position. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do all my rotations so that we're 90 degrees this direction. So I'm going to move this to negative 50 because it's still the radius of the circle, but notice how we are now in the quadrant that is directly below our robot arm. So now I'm going to rotate this so that it's in the proper direction. So I'm going to go maybe 135 to see what that looks like. All right, right here. Now here's where we have to rotate this so that our wire is coming off the side, it's not directly below our kink. So we also will need to rotate this so that we are dragging the weld as well. So I'm going to rotate this on my axis 20 degrees. There we go. And notice how our weld portion here is now outside the arm. So if I go directly below or to the top view here, it is going to be coming off of our side and up along the edge. So that's perfectly acceptable. We don't need to do anything else with this. So we're going to now rotate this so that this will work all the way around. So now let's save this position. Make sure it's 45 degrees, which looks like we're 45 degrees from our angle. We have that 20 degrees rake so that we have our drag weld. And now we're going to go down to where we have the start point, which is right here. We're going to go shift touch up. So now that's our new position. And you'll notice it says enter U-frame number. So right now that point was made with U-frame number 1. We are now in U-frame number 2. So let's go 2, enter. So now that is now touched up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this out. So I'm going to switch from the user frame to tool, and then I'm going to bring this out, my 100, there we go. And then I'm going to save that position right here. So I go here, shift touch up. Again, it's asking you, do you want to use user frame number 1? No, we want to use user frame number 2. So it's saving on that position. So it resaves that in accordance to user frame number 2. So now I'm going to go step mode, and I'm going to go forward so that I'm back at that position. Oop, I got to abort all, goes down to that position. There we go. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'll turn back on my user frame, and then I'm going to go in my 50, and then to the left 50, and now I'm going to rotate my head of the welder to 45. There we go. I still have my positive brake, so I'm going to go close out of here, and here is my position right here. Go to number 12, shift touch up, user frame number 2, enter. So now we have that position. Now we're going to go back in, item here, -50, and then we're going to go 50 out to the next position, and then we'll rotate it, and we'll switch it and subtract 90 from here, so that'll make it -45. Still have my positive brake for my drag weld. And then we go down to this position right here, which is the end of that circular path, and I go shift touch up, user frame number 2, there we go. And then we can continuously go around that weld. Move into -50, move out that -50. I need to rotate this around, so go to position, and we want to subtract 90 from -45, which gives us a -135. Proper angle. We're still good on our whip. And now I go down to line 13, close this out, shift touch up, user frame number 2, enter. So now our position right here. And then we're going to go to our last and final line here, and we're going to go position, rotate this around so I can see the head, click inside, go my 50, and then we'll bring this in 50, there we go. And then we'll rotate this again, then 90 degrees, which gives us a -225. So let's see where the whip is. So you can see the whip now rotates underneath our robotic arm. So now we need to rotate this a slight bit so that for our whip to be on the left hand side. So when we save this position here, because if I make a mistake on rotation, I can always go back to the position and start over again. So I go shift touch up, user frame number 2. So now that is saved. So now I can go in here and actually rotate this so that the whip is on the correct direction. So we need to go in here and kind of do some joint rotation. So let's switch this to tool mode, and we're going to rotate this so that this portion is actually going to be on the right hand side. So we're going to bring this down in speed. So I'm going to go about 5, and then we're going to rotate this around joint number 4, and we're going in the negative direction. So we need to hold shift, X negative, and we rotate this around. You'll notice that it kind of brings back our slight number here, almost brings it to a pull direction. But now we have our whip on the correct side with plenty of space for it not to get kinked. Okay, we just went from slightly in forward from a drag weld to slightly in a push weld, and that will start switching over to that as we get closer and closer to the end here. Okay, so it's not going to make much of a difference on the weld, but there's other ways that you modify this so that it is a drag weld all the way around. It just takes a little bit more time to do. So I'm going to reset this position. So we'll go shift touch up, and then we're going to go to our home position. So then I'm going to go continue on and make sure that this is going the correct direction. So this whip should come back around the end point. So we want to make sure that we're going to our safe position. So I'm going to insert a couple new lines. So I insert 3 lines. There we go. And I'm going to have my safe position. So I'm going to go new instruction, miscellaneous, remark. and this is going to be my weld end safe position. There we go. And we're going to bring this up R100, making sure that we are not kinking our device. So I'm actually going to bring it maybe 200, just so that we're not in the way. So I go 200. There we go. And that looks like it's pretty good. It actually might be a little overkill. So let's see what 100 is actually pretty good. We're going to keep with 100. So we're going to add move point, and we're going to go linear to this point, and we're going to bring it up at 250 millimeters per second. And then we're going to go over to our home position. So I'm going to bring it here, shift, step mode, make sure that is on, and then forward. And let's make sure that that whip is going to come around the correct direction. And that whip is coming around the correct direction to the beginning. So now let's go in here. Let's turn off step mode, and then let's run this. All the way around. It's going to start transitioning to that push, which remains on the right hand side. So if you look over here, the whip will still remain up here on this side, ends that weld, comes up, rotates around so the whip remains on the correct side. So you can see the weld start. It won't actually happen this way, it's just how the program is. But it starts here and then rotates around, starts transitioning to a push weld right about here, and then ends with our weld, comes back up, the whip is on the correct direction. So that's how you weld a circular path.